Welcome everyone to the fourth edition of our Innovation Pillar Workshop, how to define the steps in your innovation process. This is the one of six, so we're on number 4. So for those that have joined before, you're probably fairly familiar. Today's session is obviously to find out a little bit more about us as an organisation, but fundamentally to hear from our guest speakers, Alex and Giles, which I'll introduce later. I'm Johnny Fisher, one of the co-founders of IdeaDrop. We're an idea management platform, so help organizations capture and action the best ideas from their people. If you haven't had a chance yet, please do join our LinkedIn groups. So we connect everyone on these calls to those groups and obviously sort of drive correspondence communication within those groups. So everything that we see here will go on there, as well as the slides being shared by emails afterwards. So we're, I mentioned before, an enterprise management platform working across lots of different organizations globally, from the west coast of America all the way through to China and Australia. So it's used from organizations from sort of 50, 100 people up to our largest client being Ericsson, who are 100,000 people. What we're going to do today, we have very kindly Alex Fenn from Sibanye-Stillwater is going to be talking about the innovation process that they're underway. So a real life application as to how this can be deployed and the processes that they're using. We've very kindly got Giles Morgan from Etch Horizon, who's going to take us through a workshop, which is really, really interesting, having seen some of the slideware before. So talking a little bit about how it works, how it's done, and then fundamentally moving into actually the practical application of it and how they support that with their services. So key takeaways for today's session, obviously what you should have is a defined designing a streamlined innovation process. And why this is really important is innovation is not just about the capturing of the ideas, but what you do with those ideas and how you move them forward. So we're going to look at what is the structure, what is the process, what is the methodology, and how can you implement that in your organization. What we want you to take away from today is obviously the ability to implement that process within your individual businesses and to sort of prove that value back internally. We break innovation down into a number of different pillars. So we look at strategic goals, committed leadership, empowering culture, process, communication, and impact. Obviously, we're in 4 of 6 at the moment. So this is really around looking at the processes that you need to put in place. The previous sessions, if you haven't been able to make, just email myself or one of the team and we can supply the webinars. So just to chat a little bit more about the innovation impact plan, that we're doing one module of that today. So this is the impact plan that we take our customers through. So understanding what success looks like, how do you communicate that internally throughout the organization, how do you drive challenges, and then obviously how do you report value back to the business. We're kind of in the bottom right quadrant of this now, which is really looking about the process aspects of things. So how do we set up and plan for success? So good news is we're through a little bit earlier than I had time for. We have Alex. I will let you introduce yourself, but we've been working with Alex for a few years with great success. And thank you very much, Alex, for agreeing to participate today and show us some of the great work that you're doing at Sibanye-Stillwater. And I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity. Always great to share. Cool. So yeah, afternoon, evening, good morning, I guess, everybody on the call. My name is Alex. I head up the technology and innovation function for Sibanye-Stillwater, which is a multinational precious metals miner domiciled in South Africa with presence in the US and multiple other countries in project format. Go to the next one, Johnny. I think today what I'd like to discuss with you is how we as an organization define our innovation process. Next one. I think just to give some context to what we're driving as a business, we've got 6 key strategic areas that we're driving at the moment that we think add value to our various stakeholders. I'm going to run through them very quickly. But starting off with building a values-based culture. So we as an organization are very values-oriented. Everything we do is aligned with our company values. We obviously, as a mining company, need to focus on safe production and operational excellence. We have a very, very keen focus on optimizing our capital allocation. We want to prosper in our domicile country's investment climate, being South Africa, and through that pursue value accretive growth globally based on the back of an equity rating that's strengthened. And at the core of our organization is ESG, which we have a very strong focus on. I think the point of this slide is to iterate that all of these areas of the business would benefit from significant innovation. We've got a lot of opportunity to improve on all six, which is why for us defining a innovation process was extremely critical as of about 2.5 years ago. Go to the next slide, Johnny. So supporting those objectives, we took a position, it took some research to get there, but essentially the middle of last year to become an innovative digital first organization. So in terms of our understanding, it's less about technology, more about the people that are required to implement and adopt it. So for us, the definition of an innovative digital first organization is one that not only adopts innovation and digital technology as one aspect of it, but more importantly, creates the cultures, structures, and processes that support that adoption, and then look specifically to technology or digital solutions to realize an opportunity or solve problems. So establishing this position as a business was extremely important for us upfront to ensure that we could align the broad base of our organization to our strategy. But in essence, the research we did in terms of, let's go to the next one, Johnny. The research that we did on technology adoption, in particular, understanding where organizations had been successful, but more importantly, where organizations hadn't. Always good to know what not to do. We identified 3 key aspects that we needed to address in order to make sure that an organization of our scale, which I'll mention a little bit later, is able to participate effectively in the space. And the first one there is culture. So making sure that you've got diversity of thought, a lot of engagement and collaboration with your teams, the ability to accept failure and learn from it, to reinforce people that are taking those risks, and to provide thought leadership and enablement in that space is important to first establish a culture within the organization that supports technology and innovation. The second was the structure. Previously, and I think a lot of companies still do, put their innovation functions on the side of their business. They run concurrently too, as opposed to embedded in the organization. We thought we could no longer do that, which we previously did. So we have now made it lines accountability, line management to innovate, and we consider it part of our core business as a result. And then the final thing we needed to address to make sure that these energized people who are culturally accepting of technology, structured to deliver on it, don't run in tangential directions, causing all sorts of chaos. We had to make sure that we confined it without limiting innovation by establishing the process, which I think we're discussing today. So making sure that we had a rigorous process in place that allowed for innovation, but also managed the implementation thereof is important for us. Essentially, all we want to do is deliver value to the bottom line and in terms of safety. So we do have to add prudent focus to the implementation of technology through this process. Johnny, should we go to the next one? So with a relatively good understanding from a fundamental perspective of the enablers of technology adoption, we thought we would look to our most important asset, which we consider to be our employees, to understand, considering where we are as an organization and the fact that we want to drive towards this inclusive innovation culture. Where are you in terms of your understanding of this aspect of the business? A significant component of the organization was very pro-technology, so 90% of the business is on the same page in the sense that it's necessary for our organization. 75% also a very strong contingent of the business believe that they themselves could add value by putting forward their ideas. 94% also very significant suggested or confirmed that collaboration is key. Post the submission of an idea, adding that multidisciplinary focus to it is only going to enhance the value thereof. But unfortunately, 61% of our organization had absolutely no idea how to contribute to this process. So we've got an employee base in excess of 80,000 people, predominantly in SA, and we thought we were missing a significant opportunity to benefit from this collective intelligence if we weren't soliciting these ideas from our employees in the get-go, which is in essence the feed into the broader process, which, Johnny, I think we start talking about the framework on the next slide. So again, building in our understanding of those 3 aspects we needed to address and our employees' inherent energy to participate in the environment, we as an organization pivoted our technology strategy away from being an implementation or execution arm to being an enabled environment with empowered people and appropriate systems that supports the autonomous and effective adoption of technology across our entire employee base, which is enormous and extremely diverse. So focusing specifically on the enabled side on inclusivity and diversity, making sure that people are capable of participating in the space is also important. Giving somebody an objective and not enabling them to achieve it is detrimental to the process. So that was very, very key. But then also ensuring that we added an element of transparency so that people were aware of what other parts of the organization were doing and they were free to participate in those spaces if they had the capacity to do so. So again, I think it's a very significant pivot for us, moving away from pursuing technology specifically into enabling others to pursue technology through a structured process. Johnny, next slide. So this is essentially what our process looks like at this point in time. It's 7 steps consisting of 2 specific sort of sub-processes. On the left-hand side, steps 1 to 3, we refer to as idea management. And that's really generating ideas from the organization and identifying opportunities for improvements, filtering those ideas, and then collaborating on those ideas to enhance the value thereof. And then on the right-hand side, the subsequent 4 steps deal with the implementation and value delivery, which is not necessarily covered by idea drop, but the value of the process is significantly enhanced by that sort of incoming pipeline of ideas that comes on the left-hand side. But basically, almost a conventional sort of filtering process, but structured to cater for a significant number of people contributing to it, but also structured to deliver significant value on the back end of it. So we've gone through a couple of, I guess, testing the process. In essence, we weren't confident in rolling it out in its entirety. We're still learning about how people are managing either end of that process, but we sort of implemented it in our back office, which seems like a relatively small place to do it, but in our organization it is significant. Most importantly, a significant value pipeline running through there at over 800 million rand at this point in time. But more importantly, that it's driven by 27 business-led projects. We've delivered 200 million of bottom line benefit to date. And more importantly for us, we aren't delivering this value on behalf of the organization. The organization is delivering it on behalf of themselves. Also important in terms of this specific use case is that that team is now basically running it autonomously. We completed this initiative in February of 2020, and that project is still essentially, or rather that program is sustainable to date. So that pipeline is continuously being updated. These employees are capable of implementing these initiatives, and they are delivering significant value through innovation in the organization. We pop to the next one, Johnny. Not sure if I missed anything there. Where we are at the moment is testing this in the operational environment. So our value chain being quite significant and fairly complex. I've added some stats on the potential through the ideas that have been identified to date, but they are significant if you put them in the context of their respective processes. In mining, it's a relatively stable value chain. We are inherently proficient at it. So our organization, out of interest, has more than quintupled. No, what's dectupled? So it's 10 or 13 times the size it was in 2013, which is sort of like startup growth. On the back of the fact that we as a company are very good at what we do, at least we like to think so. So being able to identify the percentages you see on the screen in terms of benefit by using a process and leveraging employee ideas is significant for us. Essentially, we've squeezed as much of the lemon as we can, but now we're still seeing benefit on it. More importantly, in terms of the testing we're doing now, 30% of the on-site employees are involved in these processes. So talking to inclusivity and diversity of thought specifically, the 14 key areas of our value chain which we've identified improvements in, and specifically 61 ideas generated that's delivering value in each of these respective value chain areas, which is important to us. Again, stressing that our organization being inherently complex and enormous in every respect would be difficult for us to attempt to try and innovate on their behalf. So being able to deliver or enable people to innovate on their own is extremely important for us, and we are seeing significant value there. You go to the next one, Johnny. And this is, I guess, an example of how we're leveraging Idea Drop to support this journey. So we are running a series of challenges under a campaign focused on energy and decarbonization. At the moment, there's currently 8 specific challenges under that campaign, dealing with various aspects of our energy consumption and how to optimize it and indirectly achieve decarbonization benefits for it. This challenge in particular is dealing with water pumping, which seems like a relatively small issue, but our organization in SA pumps 270 million liters of water every day. So it is an enormous operation in itself. It costs us a lot of money to do, and it emits a lot of carbon emissions on the back end of that energy consumption. This challenge was put on the platform for 2 weeks. And being led by senior leadership, which is important as well. You need that commitment from the executive so that you show buy-in to the process. But what the challenge itself does is drive up engagement on the platform. We were able to deliver the challenge to 300 plus employees. So 300 people were effectively tasked with solving a particular issue, which is something that we can't do in our conventional methods. There were 40 plus ideas and comments submitted to this particular challenge. We've identified 7 programs of work because we got such a significant response that we actually can't select specific ideas. We need to establish programs in which there are 18 projects that we plan to run over the next 6 weeks. And those 18 projects will be managed by a team or sub-teams within, made up of 35 employees that contributed those ideas that were selected. So again, these 35 people wouldn't be focused on this initiative hadn't it been for our ability to deliver it to the expanse of our organization who's contributing to solutions. Just an idea of the spend in the space, we spend roughly 1.3 billion rand on pumping every year. So being able to squeeze 10% out of that through efficiency initiatives, with which this challenge is essentially calling for, would save us an enormous amount of money, and that's only one component of an 8-challenge campaign. So we're very excited to see what the rest of the challenges deliver, but essentially within 2 weeks, we've managed to put together 7 programs with 18 projects in, with a team of 35 people to focus on a specific issue that we are experiencing as an organization. Hop to the next one, Johnny. So just, I guess, in conclusion, I think everyone knows that technology and innovation is important to any organization at this point in time. So we've taken the position to pursue it quite aggressively. We've also recognized that it's going to need to be driven by line in the organization if we're going to enable adoption at scale. Importantly, in the context of today's discussion, we underpin the strategy with a process that we think and have proven makes sense to the business. So it's helping people innovate effectively, autonomously, and within the bounds of our regulatory frameworks, if we put it that way. We spent a considerable amount of effort embedding phase 1, which is idea management, and the platform we elected to go for there was obviously Idea Drop. It is the best I've seen, and nobody paid me to say that. And then phase 2 is intended to embed the innovation management side. So delivering the value that we've identified through the idea management phase is now a priority for us. What we do intend to do as well is leverage the platform to understand where the current process might be lacking or where our strategies might be lacking as well. So we've tried to take a humble approach to technology and innovation, establishing the framework. We're not committed to it entirely. We're fairly certain that the process will stay, but we're using the insights that are provided to us through these platforms to make slight amendments to the strategy that leave lasting impact on our organization. Yeah, and I think that's it. Very important to have a process.
Thank you very much, Alex, and not only for the shameless plug, which was very nice. Thank you, but yeah, a really thorough and detailed presentation, which I believe as long as we're able to can share afterwards. But I'd written down lots of notes of things we were going to say, but actually I know we're a bit short in time, so I'll not go through them. But I think in particular, having a continuous evolving framework is one of the things that I took, which is this isn't a fixed process. Innovation is about the journey and actually understanding and how you move and adapt with it. And the other part being, and it's kind of interesting, you kind of talk about culture first and then process, and you're kind of saying the other way around in a way, is actually the process helps drive the culture, which is put the process in place, make it an accountability for everyone, the line management, in order to embed it across the organization, and that actually creates the culture. So interestingly, you can kind of look at the steps you take in innovation as a sequentially, but actually they're all, as you would expect, interlinked and can work in different ways. So hugely enjoyable presentation. Big thank you, Alex, for that. I really enjoyed it. I've learned quite a lot, actually, more than I thought. So I will take that away. Thank you. We're going to do Q&A towards the end, so I'm sure Alex will be here and happy to answer questions. And again, we'll connect through the LinkedIn group as we can do. So if I go on to the next slide, we have our next guest speaker, Giles Morgan, who's head of Horizon at Etch Horizon. So Giles, I'm going to stop sharing, I believe, and you're going to take over. So over to you.
No worries. Hi, everyone. I'm Giles Morgan. I head up Etch Horizon. I'm fortunate enough to have been in innovation for 31 years, although that does make me very old. Yeah, I get paid to focus on rapid value creation, disruption, and I get to tell people no lots and challenge them, which is lots of fun. I've been in all sides of innovation. 20 years in media. I've had a bunch of startups, and even did the corporate thing and spent 6.5 years at KPMG and EY building innovative assets for them. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Etch Horizon later. So I'm just going to jump into the deck and share my screen, and then we're going to do a little workshop. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. We're going to go through defining the steps in your innovation process. Innovation is about dealing with uncertainty and risk. There's lots of things that we don't know and we can't predict what's going to work. In some ways, ideas are the easy part. It's creating and capturing sustainable long-term value that's tough. So first, we'll do a quick survey to get a feel for how your innovation process looks today. And in part two, we're going to talk about some of the key factors when designing an efficient innovation process. And we're going to focus in on how to progress ideas effectively towards implementation. Once you have ideas, how do you move forward? And then we're going to try a little exercise and get you guys to do the work, which is always fun. So you should see a link in the chat of Zoom. So if you can go and click on that link, and then start answering those questions, and the results should be on the screen as you go through these questions. So only one person is on the link, so if we can just make sure everyone jumps on the link. Just going to refresh the screen. And there you go, it's starting to change. So we're scoring your rewards and incentives practice. So it seems like innovation doesn't have a dedicated incentive system that differs from the core business. We seem to have started on the third one in the poll, so we're going to go backwards. So if you go on to question 2 now, innovation practice, score your process management practice. That's interesting. Wow, even at the moment. It seems like we occasionally use iterative processes and systematic business experiments to test business ideas. Seems to be the winner. Okay. I'm just going to move us on to question 1. We've gone the wrong way around. That's okay. It's innovation. And then leadership support. Score your portfolio management practice. So leadership is mainly focused on improving the core business. We make some investments to explore the future in new business models. And leadership is eager to pioneer and invest in a large innovation pipeline of small bets, of which the best get follow-up investments. Okay, interesting. Okay, great. Fantastic. Well, that's some good insight at the start. I'm just going to deactivate the poll and I'm going to jump back into our main talk today. So defining your innovation process, right-sizing innovation process depends on your size, market position, maturity, strategy, and capabilities. So today we'll take a look at that, and then we'll share a more disruptive way to just get started. So an experiment in this context is a cheap, rapid test that creates data. To inform decision making, there's a lot of the theory and philosophy around experiments. This can be applied to innovation, business, and learning methods. It takes a lot of the same principles, so I'm going to go through some of those today. So innovation process considerations, maturity assessment, where are we now? So you've already covered that. This is about assessing and uncovering current weaknesses or blind spots in your existing strategy, capabilities, activities, and culture. And then from a strategic perspective, what's our purpose? Where do we play? And how do we win? Your innovation strategy should form the bridge between your high-level corporate purpose, mission, and vision and intent, and translate all the way down to the day-to-day team activities that deliver the desired impact results. Companies have a choice about how much to focus on exploring new business models, markets, and technical competencies versus exploiting existing capabilities, business models, and markets. There are more ways of describing the types of innovation, but this gives a sort of simple overview. Each business must define what level of risk, uncertainty, and opportunity is right for them. So, transformative in terms of new business models, value propositions, and entirely new growth engines. Sustaining, replacing, and extending existing value propositions, new channels and geographies, and efficiency, improving processes and existing business models. Each type of these carries their own risks. A transformation innovation protects from disruption, but takes longer to realize. Sustaining builds value through adjacencies, but it's continuous innovation and risks disruption. And efficiency helps capture existing market share, but again, risks disruption and eventual obsolescence. Equally, you need to be careful around exploiting too much or exploring too much. So when we look at capabilities, what skills, activities, and systems do we need? You need to define the types of programs you want to pursue and get good at to enable your innovation strategy. They're outlined here are some examples covering external, blended, and internally focused initiatives at various levels of investment. All of these need process, governance, and management design, and the relevant tools, methodology, skill sets, and training to develop a strong capability and culture of innovation within your organization. So when we look at process, how do we manage innovation execution? So this approach to idea management is about the process of making business ideas usable at scale. The objective is to increase the likelihood of discovering innovation opportunities while minimizing costs and disruption. An ideator is an individual in an organization's ecosystem, internal or external, in open innovation or partnerships, as an example, you can see here. Ideas are stored, socialized, enriched in a central repository, such as Idea Drop. I use Idea Drop within Etch Horizon, internally facing, and we also are a partner of Idea Drop externally with our clients. Evaluators are innovation and domain experts who estimate idea potential and provide feedback. So this is a lot of what I do when I talk around challenge and rapid value creation. And ideas scored as having potential are moved through the pipeline into an opportunity or ready for development stage. Individuals and teams who may benefit from these ideas can then initiate further development of the idea with or without the original person or the original team that came up with the idea, to move into experimentation, concept testing and analysis, or to move straight into implementation if the idea is, say, a no-brainer. This might involve handing over into an existing production team within an organization. Leaders regularly participate, provide feedback, and help formulate and prioritize problems and challenges that are informed by the corporate strategy, but this shouldn't be overbearing. Ideas can be evolved, grouped, and adapted. They're organic and are not archived, but are codified and can be resurfaced and associated to different challenges as the business demands. As you can see here, from an innovation macro, processes sustain your business portfolio. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier under the exploit side. Ideas are developed and evaluated and de-risked through testing, and exploit emerging ideas are scaled, existing business models are improved, reinvented, or transitioned. And this goes back to what we're going to be discussing today and in the workshop around experimentation, a very important part. Statistics from early stage venture capital investment show that the majority of early stage investments won't return capital or will only provide small returns. Only about 0.4% of investments delivered outsized returns, i.e. 50 times ROI. 6% produce 5 to 10% return, and you have to invest in at least 4 projects to see any return beyond the invested capital. In a startup and venture, while risk and uncertainty are acknowledged and investments are spread over a portfolio of projects, this is combined with metered funding that equips teams with capital over a series of rounds. Only ideas with traction are retained and get follow-up funding to continue. In other words, a large number of ideas get small amounts of money to get started. This is something to think about. I operate in the venture capital marketplace also. And so this is actually a really good way of looking at it internally within your organization as a VC within your organization. Would you deploy capital to these ideas internally rather than this being from a VC approach externally? So how do we get started? Experimentation, possibly the most powerful galvanizing force in corporate innovation today. This is a quote. It came from a friend of ours, Elvin Turner, and a little plug here. If you go to Etch Horizon's podcast, you'll be able to watch that podcast with Elvin. Another one is, if you double the number of experiments you do per year, you're going to double your inventiveness, from Jeff Bezos. This comment is about human ability to collect lots and lots of different data points and detect patterns. If you imagine a child trying to do things and exploring how the world works, exploring how cause and effect works, humans have the unique ability to spot and hunt for if and then patterns, the systemizing mechanism behind this. We can apply this data gathering mindset to innovation. Collecting data informs a first principles approach as a foundation for innovation process, something that Elon Musk talks a lot about. But really, we're going to talk about experiments and do a workshop about experiments today, because experiments change everything, because experiments have the power to change everything, change the way we work, change the way that we learn. IBM had a voice specialist in the 1980s who they were working with on a new product development, and they thought that they might be able to create a computer that removed the use of a keyboard. And this would be a good idea. So they set up a situation where someone could walk in there, there'd be a computer with no keyboard, they could talk to the computer, and incredibly, for the test guinea pigs, it would write things back to them and respond to that. Little did they know that down the corridor, there was someone in another room with headphones, just like me today, just listening to everything they said and then writing the responses just to make it seem like the computer was talking to them. They did this as a way to test whether this would be a good idea. But what they found out was that after the initial sort of magic of the situation, people's throats got really sore. It was actually hurting their voice. They couldn't talk about confidential matters, and it'd get really difficult in an open space. So quite quickly, the idea was binned, and they didn't go that route, and keyboards stayed around even to today. So this is an example of an idea that was tested. I'm not going to focus on ideas today and what a good idea looks like. That's a different conversation. But once you've had an idea, you know, what do you actually do next? You experiment. A cheap, rapid test that creates data to inform decision making. So an experiment in this context is a cheap, rapid test that creates data. So there's a lot of theory and philosophy around experiments, and this can be applied to innovation, business, learning methods, and takes a lot of the same principles. So I'm going to go through the experimentation process. So there are 5 steps in the experimentation cycle. So you've got an idea of what to do with it. So step 1, you know, frame your assumption. So we believe that. Step 1, start with a leap of faith. Can it be proven? Single-minded and discrete. So step 2, then you think about, to verify that we will, you know, is it small, cheap, fast, learning rich, clear metrics and success criteria. Step 3, run the experiment, collect data. This is very important, don't try and make it work, learn from what happens. Step 4, review those learnings. We're right if, you know, you've got a predefined criteria of success. You assess the evidence and strength, and then potentially get an outside opinion and start to challenge even more. And then step 5, make a decision, you know, accept the hypothesis and increase evidence strength, or reject the hypothesis and tweak or retest to confirm or pivot, and then capture, share the learnings, test the next assumption, and expand the context and scale. So in experimentation, you look at, or you use, a number of things that you can use, but one of those is experiment cards. So you'll be using these today throughout the process. These are a couple of examples, and you can see there are sort of gradings and of how critical the assumption to the success of the idea, how reliable is the data, you know, what's the cost, how much time required. And this just gives you 2 different examples, and this approach can be applied to obviously much, much more than that. When you're thinking about scaling, some use eBay, such as eBay use the analogy of testing something in a tank where it's really controlled environment and very cheap, but a simulation and maybe less real world. So moving out into a pond, it might be a bigger audience, either internally or externally. And then ocean is when you scale up and go out to the whole market and anyone has access to it. So to zoom out a little at the start, you have high uncertainty about whether a business idea is going to work, and your goal is to reduce risk of it being wrong. Your process can reduce uncertainty by progressively investing in experiments that collect more reliable and strong data and evidence as you go, and you only increase spend when the evidence tells you to. So key innovation process takeaways are: map where your innovation efforts are today and successes to date. Use innovation strategy to action corporate purpose and set meaningful goals. be explicit about the types of innovation and capabilities required, design agile micro and macro processes enabled through technology, and use experimentation to create a culture of data-driven learning. So what I'm going to do now is, we've gone through this. I'm going to pass over to Anastasia. So Anastasia, if you take control. And the guys from Idea Drop are going to take you into a mural. We're going to send you to separate breakout rooms, and we've got a set of scenarios set up in Mural. The Idea Drop facilitators are going to manage the mural for you, and you're going to spend the next 10-15 minutes, I guess, working on these experimentation challenges. Yeah, so it was good. So, I mean, I'll put it back to the facilitators, but, you know, a couple of things would be good to know. Did you find the process? You know, this is about experimentation, so, which is obviously important. I jumped into one of the rooms, so it's quite interesting. Room 3 was, as you can see here, if I just sort of jump in, was amazing. A fantastic team, loads of ideas. Loads of tests. What I would probably say is, you know, when you've got a lot of these, you know, ideas to test and so on, sometimes you can have too many. So just sort of be aware of and cognizant of sort of with this team, if they were working together, I would say probably, you know, now we need to sort of start to filter this and break these down into smaller tests. But yeah, that was amazing, guys. So, you know, absolutely fantastic work on this. In 2, I would say the other sort of sometimes not mistakes, but sometimes things you sort of go into a solutioning scenario immediately, and you want to sort of try and stop doing that. So this was about sort of remote workers, and you know, we straight into sort of let's start using MS Teams. God forbid. But it's sort of, you know, we need a sort of, rather than MS Teams, sort of a messaging platform. And then the test would be, you know, can we create sort of micro teams within the organization, one testing Slack, one testing Teams, one testing this, and so on. So before solutioning to, you know, getting to a solution, looking at the market, understanding, you know, what's going to be relevant, and so on. So I think that's probably the biggest things I sort of picked up on. Also, a couple of people mentioned about sort of get the staff to measure the effectiveness of tools. You know, that's those poor, you know, our poor humans, our people within our organization, putting it all straight onto them. Is it any good? No, it crashed and burned. Right, you're fired. You know, so it's sort of like, you know, look at the, you know, with something like that, sort of look at the engagement, you know, the increase in productivity, you know, people, you know, people's preferences, like we said earlier, sort of taking you out. Don't try and make the experiment work. You know, humans are our most valuable commodity within every single one of our organizations when it comes to innovation, but equally, you know, trying to make it work would be maybe sometimes putting into that the hands of the employees to actually decide, you know, whether it's successful or not. You do need an element of that, but also you need to have a look at factual data as well, which goes back to what I was talking about at the start, is that, you know, are the engagement levels high? So a good example of that with a sort of this kind of remote workers messaging platform is that if you're like me, you hate MS Teams, and you know, you love another platform. You know, I might be biased to saying, actually, I just want to use Slack. And a lot of people may follow that, or a lot of people may agree with that. And that actually might not be the right solution at the right time. So you've got to have a fair chunk of human as well as data to back that up. But I'm going to pass it back over now to the facilitators so they can talk about, but most importantly, can we, you know, did you enjoy the experiment, and did it give you a good process?
Yeah, this is Sam from Breakout Room 2 talking now, and I actually found it really useful. I think I've got a couple of hands. I got everyone distracted talking about the idea of what a test is in the first place, so we didn't fill out our cards. And you raised a very good point about jumping straight into solutions. That's something we spotted, and Johan in my team raised a very good point about having to test the problem first and work out if you've got this problem statement. Within that are several different problems about not being able to action emails correctly and not having a centralized source of truth for projects. And so we're trying to work out what the problems are in the first place, and then starting to test the solutions out seems to be quite a powerful route to take.
Great. Any other facilitators?
Yeah, for sure. Nick from Breakout Room 1. And again, I think there's lots of learning to be taken from, again, solution designing too quickly. I think what we found was that our problem centered around sort of, again, different changes in the way that sort of staff and employees were active at work, and the problem of handing over projects and tasks within that sort of that changing environment. And the initial reaction is tooling, it's software, and I think that's probably indicative of the year we've had, where that has been a reaction for a lot of companies and organisations moving to work from home under the circumstances. But we sort of stepped back a little bit and said, well, what if that actually harms productivity, and what if that harms the way that projects are handed over? And I think that made us drill down into, again, assessing the problem, maybe thinking more in terms of a minimum viable product and more sort of adapting tooling that you may already have, such as spreadsheets or similar, to do a different job, or maybe numerous jobs and sort of play different roles in a current circumstance. But also ask what's the experience of different people, and how can we run sort of experiments, maybe in sort of an A/B test, or different employee groups, or more localized employee groups, in order to understand their experience of things, and their experience of how maybe solutions and hypotheses and tests within that could be sort of rolled out. But
I think the other important thing to some problems and some things that you're looking to experiment and test are big. So you find yourself getting into a situation where you can run sort of experimentation and testing, in a non-agile way as such. So you end up trying to test this massive mammoth thing, when ultimately you should be testing smaller parts of it along the way. So I think that's important. Julian, you were in Breakout Room 3.
Yeah, so we had a great room. Everyone was really engaged. So basically our scenario at a high level was how we could transform the way finance use physical documents and trying to digitally transform that. The problem was there was too many answers, unfortunately. So trying to streamline that approach, that hypothesis, to give a lot of these tests and metrics, looks like unfortunately we've lost all of our tests there. But it was a good problem to have, is just trying to really refine as you were saying, Giles, hone in on what the hypothesis was, because there's so many value statements that came out of the session in terms of it was such an obvious glaring thing that was positioned, that there were so many great things that would come out in terms of measurable metrics, ROIs that it could have had to the business in terms of intangible and tangible ROIs that could have been seen. But it was clear that the process was there, how we could measure it, and the criteria that could have happened as an outcome. So yeah, super enjoyable, but I think we could have streamlined the process there. And I think it was a great input from the team. I think Joy's got your hand up if you want to have some input from the session.
Yeah, well, and I think continuing on your point, I think starting with an understanding of the granularity, right? Like what assumptions you're making. So for me, when I approach this stuff, the first thing I want to do is say, okay, like if we're starting with an MVP, we've made these assumptions, and these are the assumptions we want to make sure we're testing and challenging. In my preference, I like to test an idea and whether or not people even want that idea, right? So like understanding if there's even a place for that, and then starting to build out prototypes after you've verified if you're even making the right assumptions about their needs. So that tends to be where I like to start, but I know every place has its own process.
Yeah. The process is, it has to be defined within a certain scope, but equally, you need some flexibility in there. People who like driving internal combustion engine cars may want, but the need is for the climate. So, I think hopefully this has shown you, I think experimentation and testing is probably the weakest part of most people's innovation life cycle. They tend to, come up with a great idea. I see this on a daily basis, come up with a great idea. If you haven't got your sort of structure in place, and it comes from a leadership, ultimately those ideas can also flow very quickly through the innovation life cycle to a proposition, when sometimes they shouldn't even get through the first stage gate. And also I think a lot of the time testing is missed, and I think testing is incredibly important. In fact, I think probably experimentation and testing is probably, for me, the most important part of the innovation lifecycle, because without that, ultimately you're, as they say in the US, drinking your own Kool-Aid. So I think that's good. It's really, really nice. I'll pass it back to the guys. If after the event you'd like to know more, as I said, I run Etch Horizon. I built Etch Horizon after doing some testing and experimentation of having worked for EY and KPMG, decided that I was going to go and disrupt them. So that's what Etch Horizon is about. We are a boutique disruptive consultancy that is there to disrupt the big four and cause them problems. We work with Idea Drop, as I said, and Mural globally to help companies create rapid value creation within their strategic and innovation departments. So we don't replace innovation departments. We just come along and speed you up. So that's what we do. That's my pitch. I'm not going to sell. I'll put it back to Johnny and Anastasia. Thanks very much for your time, guys, and for being involved.
Thank you very much, Giles, and for the really thorough session. There's lots to it. I got a bit carried away with the post-it notes when I found that functionality in the tool, so apologies to anybody in my group. Let me just re-present, 2 seconds. Hopefully that's showing everything now. We're going to break into Q&A, but just before we do, we had this up at the start, so contextually, Idea Drop are really interested in innovation ideation globally, so not just about how this works within the enterprise, but equally how can we come up with ideas that help and support the world. So we have a number of public challenges that we're running. If you take a picture of the QR scan code, we'll take you through to our public page where we have 6 challenges running. All the ideas that we generate will be going to the organizations that they affect the most. So looking at how COVID's affecting healthcare systems, looking at how people go back to work. We'll also be sharing it through our LinkedIn groups and our forums and various other things. The purpose is around how do we support the greater good, and how do we help generate ideas that make the world that we live in a better place. So there's a slightly sort of holistic view point as well. But please do get involved. All ideas are welcome, and we'd love to hear from you. But just before we do Q&A, we have our next session, our 5th of the 6th pillars, is on the 4th of August. Obviously, please sign up. We'll send the details, of course. But yeah, we've got 5 minutes or 4 minutes or 3 minutes, I think now. Should we do a quick Q&A for absolutely anything? I think we've still got Giles and still got Alex, who probably can answer questions, or put your hands up or shout out, or I'll have a look on the chat. We've got GC8039. Over to you.
Hi, it's Gemma Chandler from Lewis Silkin, behind the GC8039. It was a question for Alex, actually. And when you did your presentation, you mentioned that through Idea Drop, you managed to identify like a big program of work and a number of projects that sat underneath it. I think that one of the challenges that we have at LS, it isn't the number of ideas, it's then how do we actually go and execute that. So I'm just wondering, and deliver them in line with our other portfolio of loads of other projects that we've also got on. So I'm just wondering how you navigated that in your organisation.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I think we follow numerous approaches depending on a number of factors, specifically more so on the complexity and the relevance side. So different business units within the organization, if it's relevant to a lot, we'll consolidate those projects at an organizational level and support them through our PACE project implementation framework, which is basically the mining equivalent of Agile. And in those processes, we have rigorous, tracking of value, ensuring that the schedule is delivered on, and that we are seeing those benefits in the organization. Also important is if it's not working, we just like to can it before we waste too much time. But it really is on a case-by-case basis, because some of these initiatives come with 18-month plans and significant investments, and some you can do in 2 weeks. So we've got a very open mind in terms of how we consolidate those programs and implement them. We're not necessarily specifically following a particular process there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Probably got time for one more question. Apologies, we don't have a lot of time. We can follow up on LinkedIn afterwards on our group. Any final question? If it's in the chat, I can look. Yes, Joy, over to you.
Yeah, sorry, I had to turn off my camera. You mentioned rigorous tracking. What do you use for tracking? Like, how do you communicate that to your teams?
At the moment, it's a hybrid, and I guess it's whatever's appropriate for the task. If it is significant in value, both in terms of the investment and the potential opportunity, we will lodge it on a platform that we use that is built on value driver trees. We upload the metrics on a weekly basis, and those are visible to everyone involved as well as the broader organization. But if it's a small initiative, we're very happy to do that on Excel or via email, even depending on the importance thereof. We don't want to be onerous in it. If we can see benefit, we don't necessarily need to boil the ocean in terms of analysis. So it is, again, horses for courses, depending on the complexity and the scale. But we do have a platform on the larger scale projects that we use to track it, which is proprietary to a company that I can't disclose, unfortunately.
Thank you, Alex. I think the key takeaway is it's variable. Not every idea should be treated in the same way, because some are quick wins, executional at line manager level, whereas others are global, multi-year, multi-million-pound rand investments. I think we're a little bit over, but thank you very much for everyone's time, but in particular for Alex and Giles, who put together some very thorough presentations. Thank you for the idea drop facilitators in what was a really, really interesting exercise. We'll be following up with everyone post this with all the content and information, sharing details through our record groups. But yeah, big thank you from me, and wishing you all a good rest of the day wherever you are. And I hope to see you all at the next session on the 4th of August.